Welcome back everyone. So I'm assessing my first wash and I think I might have overestimated my color a little bit. It's a little bit warmer than I wanted it to be, but it's okay. Remember, we're trying to represent this image and learn something from it and not necessarily replicate it to the T. However, I did feel that the wash is too flat and too even. And if you're sort of curious about like where you are in your painting journey, then take a photograph of your reference material and your art at the same time next to each other. And I'm going to insert my photograph that I took here. There we go. And you will notice that I wasn't too far off. Actually, when we look at a grayscale picture, it sort of takes the confusion out of it, because really what we're looking at is if you nailed the value, not so much the hue. And looking at this image, I think I pretty did very well. The only difference is this is a photograph taken in a studio with professional light, and this is a painting of a photo. So that's the difference. So I did notice that here on the right hand side, right next to the ice cream cone and the ice cream soft serve, it's a little bit lighter. It gives it a little bit more contrast here. So this side of the image is like half a little bit deeper than the light right next to the ice cream cone. So what do we do to fix that problem? Well, usually we can fix the problem by adding another layer, which would make it darker still. I don't want it darker. I think it's dark enough. In fact, I want it to be softer and lighter. So I've already sort of lightened this part of the painting, and I'm just going to show you now how I did it. And what you will need is a dry tissue, a sturdy brush with clean water. And you're basically just going to wet the page where you want to lift some color and just give it a gentle wash. And you will see that the pigment that is still available at the top of the surface of the paper will start to give. And then you put the dry paper down and just firmly press down and allow the kitchen towel to soak up that water. And you can see that that is a little bit lighter. It just removes a little bit of the pigment there so that it's not so deep. Now, if your first wash is exactly like mine, then you might want to try this. But if yours is a little bit lighter, then don't worry about it. I thought I would just show you guys what is possible. You don't always have to, give up and say, oh, well, that's too dark, so let's start over. It's not necessary. And I think in the end, it just gives the painting a little bit more sort of life to play with. And I noticed that there was a little bit of extra deposit there on the side that really irritated me. So I'm going to go ahead and just lift that up as well. That feels so much better to me. And you can see it's such a minute amount of color, but it does make a visual difference. And then I just make sure that I don't leave any straight lines. Alrighty then, that feels a lot better to me. Let's work on this area a little bit more. What we are going to remedy is the shadow. I went too far. I think I should have done it a little bit sooner. I think I waited too long and I made this very broad. It's not that broad, so it's okay. We're going to leave this alone and we will just make the shadow a little bit crisper and a little bit darker and define the shape of it a little bit later. But for now, I think we're in a very good place and I'm so happy with our beautiful first wash. Now you can see what I mean when we talk about the ice cream and the white of the ice cream and how on earth are we going to have a contrast that's going to show the white of the ice cream without painting the white of the ice cream necessarily. And now that we have a bit of contrast between the background and the ice cream, we can see that there is a huge difference. So it really stands out quite a bit from the page. But we're not going to worry about the ice cream yet. We are going to look at the shadows on our ice cream cone. Now, it does pay to just take a little bit of time and look at the area. Like here you can see there's a little bit of a shadow and then we have a shadow like in the middle of the ice cream. So it's almost like we've got light from the left, but we also have a back cast from the right. So there's definitely some highlights on the right as well. So the deepest point of our shadow is sitting here in this middle point. And I want to capture a little bit of that shadow by cooling it a little bit down before we start going into any detail. And I think we need to mix a very nice sort of neutral to cool shadow. And I think for that I'm going to use my Ultramarine Blue. Let's get some water going here. Oh, I haven't misted my watercolors yet. I've just focused on the value of the background. So now that we are ready to paint, we can wet our watercolors and just allow them to activate a little bit. So we're going to need a bit of water here. I'm going to start with some Ultramarine Blue. It's such a good, what shall we call it, shadow color because it's cool. The ultramarine has a little bit of a violet hue to it, so that's very nice. And I'm also going to add a little bit of burnt sienna. Very little, so I just want to break down that blue so that it doesn't feel too blue. And you can see it's starting to grey it down a little bit. Right, let's do a test on a clean sheet of paper. That feels like a beautiful shadow color. I think that will work for us. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. So let's go in under the ice cream and we're going to work in a block. And we are just going to let this ice cream stand out even more. by giving it a little bit of a shadow before we even worry about the color. Now a little bit on the edge here, till about halfway, feels like it's shadow, and then almost like a 7, it comes down through the central core all the way down into the bottom. That feels beautiful. I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to clean off most of the water, and I'm just going to take the damp brush around these edges and just blend the shadow in so that it's not hard. Wow, people, we've made our first shadow long before we even worry about the color of this beautiful wafer biscuit. We are going to put in the shadow. Right. While we have this beautiful mixture, I'm going to bring a little bit of ultramarine blue back into my mix here at the top. I'm going to use my burnt sienna to just cool down that violet tone a little bit. Let's see. It's a little bit too dark, so a drop of water. Let's lighten this up a little bit more. That should do the trick. Okay. Now let's look at the actual ice cream. And we notice that we have a little bit of shadow in this section of the ice cream. So just follow your curvature in this part of the ice cream. And let's just build in a nice, beautiful shadow. And we have a nice shadow sitting here as well. I'm just going to take a dry brush and just lift up some of the excess water in the shadow. I don't want it to pool. That brush is a bit big, so let's get a smaller one handy. Alrighty. I'm going to focus on the darkest bits here. Being very careful here not to go into those warmer zones. We have a beautiful shadow over here. This is white, and then this is shadow again. There's a white highlight. Beautiful. And this is shadow. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of a white space around each of these shadows, because there's some reflective highlights coming back at it. This is also a little bit in shadow, so I'm going to go ahead and connect this part of the shadow. So now our soft little pencil lines is just giving us an indication, a nice indication of where each of these segments are lying. So it's really helpful. And now I'm just picking up a little bit of that shadow areas that's a little bit lighter. We have a nice shadow over here as well. At the top of this one. And at the top of that one. I think I'm going to use the same shadow color that I've got on the ice cream to strengthen this skinny shadow. And I'm just correcting my own painting error there. That's going to feel so much better. Let's rinse off and take a very deep breath. Alrighty then, we're going to wait for this to dry, or you can make it dry by using a hairdryer. Because next I'm going to look at the individual shadows of each of these little blocks, and I want to work on dry paper. For that, I think it's going to help us create a little bit more contrast as well. Welcome back everyone. So this is dry, and look at the dramatic change that just an introduction of a shadow brings. And I also like that it's a unified shadow, in the sense that we've used sort of the whole step to introduce a base shadow that's going to help us to define our beautiful soft serve ice cream. So I've got here an ordinary student grade white wax crayon, and I like to sharpen it with my sharpener just to have a bit of a finer tip. Because before we go any further, we have to ensure that we've got a protected highlight area in our painting so that we don't go darker by accident. So there are a few of these highlights that's really, really important. This one at the back is very important. This one is almost pure white, and more towards the contrast with the shadow. So I just want to make sure we capture that. This piece here, I almost went too dark already, and right at the bottom of the ice cream there as well. And then a soft one there on the back. Here's a fine line between those two. And again, the whitest area is right next to the shadow, so we just want to make sure we preserve that white, so that when we start to play with our washes, there is a little bit of a protection. This corner is very important. In the middle here, crisp highlight coming through here beautifully. Very important. I'm so glad I drew in that little triangle there. And those beautiful soft little highlights, so important because they're very detailed, they're very small, and the shadow is sitting in between them. So I basically just placed my shadow, and I was very careful when I painted that not to overdo this area. Right. Then on the biscuit, it doesn't have a reflective surface, so there's nothing pure white in the wafer bit, so I'm not concerned about that. Right. So we can put our little wax crayon aside for another day's drawing. Right, I think before we play any further with the ice cream, we need to establish the color of our wafer. But before we even can do the color, we must finish our shadow work. Now that I've got a recap. So I still have that that same shadow color that I've just used. I will just introduce a drop of water just to make that a bit more. So that's basically ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, very diluted. And we're going to look at each of these little squares, particularly the ones in the lighter areas, because the shadow in the sort of unified shadow is pretty much uniform, but there's a little bit more contrast in these areas that's lighter. So let's start here. And we notice that there is a little bit of a shadow underneath these little open lines. And I'm just going to draw that in. That might still be a little bit darker. Right. So I'm just going to go up diagonally with each of these. And I'm just going to emphasize the shadow a little bit here. In each of these little squares. Let's go down here. Next row, that's very soft. Here we see a little bit more. And this also allows you to correct your line if you maybe drew it a little bit skew. This whole square feels in shadow to me. This one as well, it's a little bit darker. Here we go again. Alrighty. Let's go down. Very fine shadow there, and then it starts to show up a little bit more here. This one feels completely dark, so I'm going to just give it another layer. This one definitely more towards the right hand side and the bottom, but we'll define it a little bit. That corner is very dark, so we'll do that. Beautiful. Let's go down another one. Very soft shadow, just to bring in that line work there. A little bit deeper. Filled all the way. filled all the way. Just the right bottom. And there's a dark triangle. Next one, a little bit more here. Deeper. Fill a bit more towards this top corner. We have an uneven square here that goes all the way down. Here's a little bit of a shadow. Right. Coming down here, it's a bit of a triangle here. This is a little bit deeper. Right here. So it helps to almost sketch with the shadow that we've got going there. Isn't that amazing? Right, we can rinse our brush and take off most of the water, and then just go back and just soften some of the edges on these shadows by just using damp water and just on the edge, anywhere it feels too hard, and just soften it a little bit, blend it in a little bit more here and there, just soften the edge of the shadow. That feels spectacular already. Amazing. Beautiful. I am so proud of this. Let's look at the edge of each of these shadows as well. Just a little bit. Even though that is dry, but just going over it with a damp brush, it can soften. Beautiful. Again, this has to dry, so I'm going to use my hairdryer, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. I'm going to break this up in very short, doable sessions so that you don't feel overwhelmed with the whole process. So let's do it. Let's dry it, and I'll meet back, and then we'll introduce the color into our wafer biscuit. Stay creative. Bye-bye for now.